Did it work? It's recording. Great. Okay. Well, hey everyone. I've already kind of started talking to people, but welcome to all. So far, this is how our class sessions will normally go. The first, I don't know, a few minutes is going to be answering some questions, and I always start letting people in pretty early on in case people have questions. You are by no means pressured to be here before the class time starts, but if you ever have a question or wanted to chat, you're welcome to do that. Honestly, if you contact me early, we could probably arrange to meet actually on early, even 30 minutes early to, ask questions or clarifications. But as soon as you get let in, you can start asking questions. And if I have little notes for students, I might go ahead and say like, hey, I got your email or blah, blah, blah. Really throughout the week, I take notes on things that I want to address in class. That sounds really intense. More like I don't want to forget something, so I write it down and then I will bring it up in class. And so the first few minutes of class, especially some of the more casual things, I'll just go ahead and start asking. Um, and then I always give a little bit of wiggle room for people to pop in and kind of get themselves situated and then go get your, I don't know, second cup of coffee, use the restroom, talk to your toddler, whatever it is that you need to do. So I always have like a soft start. I remember when I was a student and I'm like stress sweating trying to get online on time. And then, of course, that's when the Wi-Fi goes slow or whatever delay thing, or I'll have my Piedmont Zoom, and then there's the work Zoom, and sometimes they cross-contaminate and all the things. So I will always have a soft start. So if you ever feel like you're rushing, don't one, don't ever stress out about my class, just in general. But getting on here exactly at 5 o'clock, like you're probably okay. It's normally gonna be like 5:05 ish, where I'll kind of start this soft talk. And because I ramble, it's really now 5:09, and we haven't really started yet. So. For those of you that were here last week, welcome back. For those of you who had those strange last week of school things and whatnot, welcome for our first class session face to face. But happy that all of y'all are here. Um, any initial questions before we get started on anything? Okay. Sounds good. And because we're recording, again, for those of you who are here, you'll be exempted from one of your assignments for this week. Woohoo! And if you're not, that's totally fine. That just means that you'll do that assignment asynchronously on your own this week with the deadlines that are already embedded within Canvas. Um, that's already like reason enough to come, but hopefully class becomes a time where you feel like you're learning a lot, that you're able to supplement the things that you're learning and reading, ask questions and all that good stuff, and to make the class not feel so asynchronous, where it's just a screen and you don't really know who you're talking to, but it feels a little bit more intimate than just behind a computer. Okay, let me look at my list. To do. Does anybody have questions on assessment validity or reliability? Did all that kind of make sense? Okay. It's honest, of course there's like chapters worth of information on both those concepts, but once you know it, you pretty much know it. It's not overly complex. Um, how do I want to go about this? Sure, I'll kind of do the like spitfire some things that caught my attention. If you're trying to contact me, the best way is through email. I do check Canvas for local messages, or if you're replying to a comment or I don't know, an announcement that I send out, I will eventually see those. But if you need to contact me, it's better to email me because I receive those essentially as text messages. And like I said last week, like a text message, I can see it, the preview, I can even read the whole thing. I may not necessarily respond right away, but as I promise, super duper promise. If you email me, I'm reading it pretty immediately. It's just a matter of responding that I might not do that until the kids are down or the next morning or during my office hours or whatnot. But if you email me, I really do see it right away. If you contact me through Canvas, that's sort of like a choppy. I don't get the notification right away. So just by the way, that doesn't mean you can't message me through Canvas. But if you're looking for something more immediate, that's not really the way to go. Email me and I will see it right away. Um, Already asked about that. Do The group chat. I know I started that discussion. I didn't check on it today, but I know some people have already started adding their phone numbers. Does anyone have questions on group chat or need help facilitating whatnot? Are y'all okay with that?
Are you going to be like starting it, or are you just is that just a place for us to get our numbers together so that we can do that?
I'm not going to physically start it. I think there's some kind of teacher-student boundary, something something clause about that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
I
So,
uh I
say
put
it
a
again?
group me link in there. That way we didn't have to worry about just all texting each other on like with the
Perfect.
number of a with the size of a group message like that.
Perfect. And honestly, GroupMe is what I would recommend. That's what I had when I was a student. And it was such a lifesaver for all the graduate degrees. And it morphs depending on cohorts and classes and whatnot. But if David has already put a GroupMe link in the that discussion post, do that. Use that. And no, I'm not going to be on there. That's where you can talk bad about me and ask questions and whatever it is. I'm not going to be on there. That's a private you guys thing. I just highly recommend it, especially at the beginning of your program where some of you haven't been a student for a while or you're still getting into the rhythms of things. It's just a good safe space to ask questions and whatnot and build camaraderie. We used to share memes and GIFs and whatnot and videos. It wasn't just school all the time. So just, yes, just highly recommend that. And if David has put the group me link, then that's fantastic too. Okay.
David, I tried to click on the link and it won't, it says it's forbidden. It won't take me anywhere.
Oh, I had to copy and paste it to get it to work. I'll try to repost that in there tonight then.
Great. Okay. Um, Side note, were there two student responsibilities? Some people are shaking yes, some people are saying no. Okay. So for whatever reason, I think there's two. If you only see one, great. If you saw two, they're the same thing. I'm gonna try and find where the glitch is, but you only need to fill out one, and it should work for both that's on there. If you're confused about that, I'm sorry. I kind of saw it later on, in when I was grading that assignment, which is really just a completion grade. Um, so if you saw two, sorry for the confusion. It's all the same thing. Okay. Um, okay. A few things to clarify. When you are posting anything, whether it's a video discussion post or the assignment or any activity where you're literally submitting, there should be a works cited page or reference list because any work that you're doing should be considered scholarly. If you're doing a video post, yes, that's probably going to be the most informal submission or post that you do as a student because at least in my class, you're sitting and you're talking to your classmates as if you were presenting in a classroom, right? So it's pretty informal and relaxed. Not that you should have a pina colada in your hand and like at the beach. There should be at least some professionalism, but it should be relaxed, right? But even in that, you should still be citing Popham's textbook or any kind of supplemental articles. You're welcome to pull from any other classes that you're taking. If there's an article that you see a connection, use those as well. But if you're posting a video on the submission, you should still have the reference page. If that gets choppy, like you have to submit your video and then submit a whole nother, like you're basically replying to yourself for your reference, that's fine too. If you're doing an assignment, then obviously that's embedded, papers, etc. But everything you should be doing in this class should have a reference list because everything you're doing should be referencing some kind of scholarly work. Questions on
Of
that?
course. Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
So if I were to do a video link, can I just like, put my video link and then after that, right under it, put my links?
Yes, yeah.
I
So
mean,
it
I
could
mean my
be
references.
yeah, so if I'm looking on Canvas, I would see your video post and then directly underneath it would be the reference list. I've
Yes.
also seen it like if it's more of a formal video, like you're actually presenting a slideshow, the reference list is on the last slide. That's also fine. You wouldn't have to copy it again. That's embedded in your video.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Um, honestly, because of just the nature of the class, you're probably referencing Popham in literally everything you're doing, even if it seems like a simple assignment. There's one coming up where you're writing an email, and I do want it structured like an email, like Dear Susan, and then the body of whatever your prompt response is. Uh, kind regards, Stacy. I don't know. And then even in that, even though it's an email, the bottom of that you would still have the reference list, which obviously is not what you would do for an email. But in your email, you would say, "Yeah, I remember last week when we talked about Popham, and I said that he likes, I don't know, testing validity," and then you'd put the year behind his name, blah 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 blah. Does that help? Okay, fantastic. To do. This is a quick thing. Though you know Popham's first name, or some of you do, you don't actually ever reference the authors of a work's first name. You would just do their last name. And of course, if there's multiple authors, you would just continue listing their last names unless it's et al. Let me share my screen. I should probably actually show you what I'm talking about. 1 second. All the verifications. 6, 9. All right, all the things are loading. Come on. Jeez. There we go. Stop. Then show. Okay. Can y'all see my doc? Okay.
Yes.
So for this assignment that I'm thinking of, dear the lag. There you go. Principal. Obviously, you would use some kind of name. Thank you for your question. I am happy to respond. Popham. What's the year? No, I don't know off the top of my head. As everyone scrambled.
I have the 10th of edition and it's 25. The
Fantastic.
9th edition, I think, is 19.
Okay, we'll go with that. So Popham 2025. That was funny to see on the screen, everyone. Popham 2025 says assessment is the best thing ever. Sincerely, all the typos. Dr. Pereira. Come on. And then you would say, what is it? Reference. And then, what is it? Popham. Whoops. 2025. And then, off the top of my head, I don't even know. Assessment. Blah blah blah. Right? Y'all know what I'm saying? So in the prompt where you're going to write an email, you're going to structure it like an email, and the character count is going to be all of this, including the dear whoever the person is that's asking you a question. You'll still cite Popham and whatever else he says. In general, if it was Popham and what's another last name? My name. Okay, Pereira. then you would do the 2025. If it's multiple, you would say Popham et al. Is there a period off the top of my head? Al. Hmm. Off the top of my head, I can't remember if there's a period or not, but et al. If there's multiple authors, and then 2025 says assessment, blah, blah, blah. Make sense? Okay. Yeah. Stop sharing. Okay. Speaking of, well, before I move on, it's also gender neutral always. That's an APA 7th edition requirement. Even if you know, I don't know, it was your mom. Your mom was the author. You know for a fact that mom is, I don't know, cisgendered, female, all the super female. You would still say they, them. That's just an APA citation thing. That even if you personally know the author, you always use a gender neutral pronoun. Um, yeah. hmm Um, okay. Thank you, Sarah. Also, let me go back to here. You do know also that if I reference Popham again in the same paragraph, you don't have to put the date again. Did y'all know that little thing? Yeah, so you don't have to reference because it's his citation is already there. I guess I should finish the sentence, but that's all right. And then what did Tamar say? Oh yeah. So if you have any references that you're using in other classes that you think is really relevant, make sure to save those. If they relate at all to assessment or I don't know, student data or anything like that that you think is really helpful, save those because then you can use those in your discussion posts and assignments, and that helps for a more rich response. Okay. And then lastly, before we kind of move on to more kind of instructional things, so the character count, there were some questions about the character count. I'm not done grading some of those first week assignments. Uh, y'all don't feel like a big class until it comes to grading. It's a pretty large class. Um, so it kind of takes me a little while, at least for that first week when there were so many assignments, but it should feel better to get some feedback faster as the weeks progress. The character count should not include your references. So I will say that. However, what I did not realize is that Canvas is counting that when it shows me what the character count is. It's like an automatic generated thing. So what I would do is when you're typing out your responses where it specifically says to do it in 200 characters, 300, whatever it may be, to copy and paste what you're writing onto a character count reader, whether that's Google Docs, Word Docs, or there's even websites where you can paste what you've written out. It'll tell you the characters, and then you can copy that onto Canvas. Now, there is a difference between character count and word count. Character is like even the space or an apostrophe counts as a character, whereas the prompts are asking for 200 words. So there is a difference on that. So there is some kind of confusion on that with the first assignment. I will continue to grade week 1 as I have been just to keep things consistent. But if you go over 200, I'll know that that's because you included the reference citation. Yeah? Okay. So does anyone have the 8 factors for teacher consideration available to them? More specifically, to put it onto the chat. Does anyone have that where they can copy and paste it real quick?
Oh, I was going to say I have mine, but they're written in my notes. So, and you probably will never be able to read my handwriting if I tried to take a picture of it. So,
No, I'm just hoping to have it I guess in the chat, if anyone has that where they can copy and paste it. If not, no pressure.
okay.
To confirm, sorry, I'm back. My power's flickering on and off, so might
You're
Minor
you're fine.
y'all again. Is that the what is fairness, assessment,
And
bias, and
Philip was in
validity?
the way.
That's what it was a
Mwah.
discussion one or assignment one, maybe it was assignment one,
Okay,
where you
so
did the
what
8
auditorium are
factors.
you going to be in?
The
Okay.
8 factors was our video response.
Oh
Right,
yeah.
yeah.
All right.
Oh,
Well,
wait.
if I make a trip to to Florida, and I make it, Yeah.
I'll mute Heather. I think she got distracted. Does anyone have that? Decision focus. Yeah. Stacy's holding it up.
I can copy and paste it, or I can type it
have
in.
it.
I don't mind.
I'm working on it here.
Okay.
It's got my notes in it, but
Look at there. That's incredible. Was that Emily?
yes,
Thank you, Emily.
you're
Okay.
welcome.
So for decision making, was that like super straightforward? Did y'all know exactly what that meant once you read it? Is that something that we need to talk about? Okay, that's what I thought. So for number of assessment targets, what I'm hoping is throughout the semester, when you're learning about different assessments, as we kind of, yes, this week we can talk about bias and fairness, but eventually it's going to be different forms of assessment. I'd be curious on how you create targets. Like I think about there's one assessment where you're considering the socio-emotional wellness of each student and how they feel in your classroom, which I think is a really rich expression of assessment. So I'm curious on how that number of assessment targets, how that applies to something that has a little less traditional data, like a performance assessment, for example. How can you create different targets for those non-traditional assessments? Assessment domain emphasize. Questions on that? The norm referencing and criterion referencing. Okay. Select response is fine. Relevant curricular configurations.
I think that was where my question was. Hold on, I'm going back on my, relevant curricular configurations. That still seemed a little bit nebulous to me.
Okay. Before I say anything, does anyone feel like they had a really good understanding of that? I always prefer a peer to respond. What do y'all think? Anyone brave? Come on, y'all. You can do it. Be brave. Relevant curricular configurations.
Like, why won't okay, it took a while. I'm telling you, I've been having so many technical issues. Okay, so let me go back to the book. I'm just now getting my life together, so I apologize. Okay, what was it? Page 65, I feel like it was, but I remember reading it and I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. What is he talking about? Okay. Oh, no, it wasn't that. What? Maybe that wasn't it. Will students' performances on this classroom assessment contribute to students' mastery of your state's officially approved set of curricular aims? Oh, okay. Maybe that wasn't it then.
I can tag in. Do you want help,
Here,
Heather?
go for it, Sarah.
Okay. Is this test going to help you know whether they're prepared for the big important test, right? So are you measuring things that they need to know in order to do well on the EOC or the milestones or whatever, right?
Yeah, and actually that
Yeah.
makes sense. I realized that wasn't the one. I'm thinking it must have been something else in the chapter, and I read it and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But that one was actually pretty straightforward. So maybe that must not have been it. Yeah.
Okay. So you're good on that one.
I'm good on that one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For now, at
National-
least.
Okay. National subject matter organizations recommendations, and then collegial input. That's always an interesting one. Does anyone feel like they have a colleague that they can quickly go to? Like, hey, can you explain this better than I can? Does that happen? Okay.
Yeah, my co-teacher, she's amazing. like
Any good
math.
examples of what that looks like for those of you who don't, for those who don't have a colleague that they feel like they can depend on, for those of you who do, any advice on what that could look like or even how to facilitate what that looks like?
Well, for me, since with being a co-teacher, I'm like the specially designed instruction master. I'm not expected to have content mastery. So for me, when I have usually if I'm going to a colleague for something, I'm pretty solid on a lot of the SPED stuff, but she is who I go to because she's the math teacher and she's the content expert. So I think that, especially in a co-taught situation, when you are not the content master, utilizing a colleague in that situation can be very beneficial, because a lot of co-teachers get kind of afraid to ask questions because they don't want to look dumb. But I'm like, coming into this, I don't know the content, so I'm going to ask a million questions, and understanding the standards and understanding all of the abbreviations and the acronyms and everything else, it can be a very daunting process. And so having a colleague that I can turn to kind of help me through the math part has been extremely beneficial for me.
Yeah. Has anyone been, this is for the high school art teachers, has anyone been an AP reader? No? Okay. So for AP reading, you essentially, well, okay, take a step back. For students who are taking the AP 2D, 3D, or drawing portfolio, they have to submit a portfolio of selected works, and then this, almost like a panel of readers will look at the portfolio and assess them. Before any day of grading starts, the AP reader will essentially get a batch of portfolios that I think have already been graded, like their portfolios from last year. And you basically say, like, I think this is a score of a 4 or a 3 or a 5 or whatever it may be. And then there's an automated, like, how close were you to the target grade that was given to that student from the previous year. So it's kind of like a way to not collaborate. What is a way to collaborate? Calibrate your assessment understanding per portfolio, and you'll keep doing this program until the computer says, yes, you're ready. Now you can start grading the actual portfolios. So to me, this collegial input is helpful because it's a way to kind of calibrate your perspective on assessment, especially if it's something that's non-traditional, something that's more performative or portfolio based, that can help you better understand your perspective in whatever the assessment is. For example, if you have a rubric that has some open-endedness, so this is not like, does the student know 2 plus 2? Yes, check. Right? I mean that, like, you have the rubric, you can see exactly what their students are supposed to show mastery of, etc. But maybe even in the like ELA world, when you're thinking about reading comprehension or writing, like, yes, you have grammar mechanics, but is there any creativity component to a rubric that you might struggle with making sure you're not biased in how you are assessing a student, right? So to me, having that second input, going to a colleague who teaches the same content area or has experience in that, or maybe is adjacent in some form or fashion, and to help you in your assessment, I think can be really valuable. Within Gwinnett County, we use Teams where it connects to all the teachers within the county. So it's pretty easy to take a picture of whatever it is that we're trying to assess, send it to another teacher and say, hey, how would you grade this, or does the rubric make sense for this student, or whatnot. I do think there's a lot of value in that, and if that is not a common practice to have collegial input, to find that content buddy within your school or even another school as someone that you can go to for some collaboration and making sure that you have the proper understanding of what needs to be assessed. I have just found that to be really helpful in how you approach assessment. Any thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I find external output invaluable. It also helps remove any bias, like, or helps you view things in a different way. As someone who works at a school with two other art teachers, I think it's pretty important to try and get input from your peers.
Yeah. What about a core teacher? Math, science, social studies, ELA? Anyone ever feel like there's some collegial help that has helped them in the past?
I'll say the third grade ELA teacher that I'm with this year, me and her, which we're friends outside of school, so that comfortability really makes it where it's essentially like we're both teaching the class. Like she talks, I talk. It's just a big, and it's a huge benefit because I serve four other classes and our relationship's not the same, and we don't have that same bouncing everything back off of each other and discussing it. The other classes are very much like, they're the lead teacher, I'm the co-teacher. We have our own little, sector, but in that specific class, it's very much like she'll be texting me, "Hey, what about this? Hey, what about that?" But, outside of school when we're planning and stuff. So
Yep.
I think when you build that relationship, it's kind of invaluable.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
agree. I've been with one of my co-teachers. This is the third year. Next year will be the fourth. And it's an ebb and flow. And that's been one of my biggest things as a co-teacher is to get where it's an effortless relationship. And we moved last year from second grade to first grade, which I already had the first grade background, but it was like I had to teach her how to do it and how to the sped aspect worked of it. So it was kind of a give and take. But that co-teacher relationship is, greatly, it's crucial. So crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Probably good on that. Just in general, things that I saw from the introduction, which if you've done your introduction, I've responded to everyone. Again, there's nothing necessarily magical in my responses, but I have responded to everyone's introduction that you're welcome to look at or not. But I have done that. But I wrote down some kind of buzzwords within everyone's introduction that I think could be really helpful. And if I were y'all, I would write these down thinking about the reflection that's coming in Module 8. These are things that you can come back to, like, actually, yeah, because in Module, I don't know, 4, when we talked about this, that makes, I don't know, gather mean something in a whole new level. I think these buzzwords can be helpful as we get a holistic understanding of assessment, which was another thing that I heard a lot in the introduction, that assessment for some teachers are like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Like I use assessment all the time. It informs everything I do and blah, 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 blah. And then there's some people who sort of have some baggage and burden to assessment that it's sort of been in the way, or at least the interpretation of what assessment is, or how assessment is practically utilized in their school is like a Debbie Downer. Like it's not used in this authentic way. It almost seems like it's just getting in the way. So as we have this better understanding of assessment, let's go back to these words as kind of like consistent threads throughout the semester. And then in Module 8, when you're doing a reflection, this could be really helpful. So some of the buzzwords that I have is indicator. It indicates what needs to happen into the classroom. Another way of saying that is inform, right? It's kind of like synonym. And then support, I thought that was fantastic, that your assessment should support the efforts in your class. And as teachers, we are striving to support our students, and assessment is just another way of addressing that. Shapes, I heard a few people say that it shapes. Again, that's another way of saying inform, but it to me, that's less just informing, it's actually constructing. It's constructing your curriculum design. It's constructing or shaping what you're doing in the classroom, your pace. It gathers information. You're gathering students, kind of regrouping everyone back into one home base. I guess if you're thinking about the constant extension and remediation, and those is right in the middle where they need to be, gathering everyone back to regroup, as well as gathering information, adjusting, right? That's part of the indicating and shaping is adjusting, making small adjustments so that you're better on track. guiding is similar to that, and then measurement, right? It is a measurement. It gives you a data point that, you know, shapes, supports, indicates, etc. So those were good buzzwords as I listened to people's introduction videos that stood out to me as really rich. Now, again, you might be listening to me and saying like, well, yeah, I could have written down these words, but I think there's something, thank you, Maddie. I think there's something really nice about these one word, like strong, enriching, and empowering ways to describe assessment as a way to have a holistic understanding of assessment, especially when you're getting out of just state standards and summative assessments, but thinking about formative assessments, just that casual, like thumbs up, thumbs down. How even does that describe indication and gathering and measurements, etc.? So that's kind of the last thing for last week, but moving on to this week, I am going to just go ahead and jump into our discussion. Okay, so in module 2, all the pop-ups, geez. Okay, in module 2, yes, you're talking about assessment bias, assessment fairness, all the things related around assessment culture, I guess is a good way to think about it. So for this one, you didn't necessarily need to read anything prior, although obviously it does help to read chapters 5 and 6. But I think it is still relevant enough to the range of experiences that we have here to go and have that discussion. So I'll just read it out loud. Popham postulates that a dominant mission of educational and assessment fairness is to promote an understanding of the nature of assessment bias, as it is encountered in educational tests. This discussion provides an opportunity to discuss common causes for assessment bias through video response, aka what we're doing now. Please discuss the importance and relevance of assessment fairness and bias regarding your grade level and content learners, PLC, in school. I will say as a side note, PLC is a common theme that you'll see in the assignments. It is one of the target goals to create teacher leaders after this program is done within your local schools. And PLCs is kind of like one main way to do that. See someone in the chat. Okay, you're good. Be sure to include textual support for your ideas from your readings or lectures, as well as APA formatted reference lists. Respond to blah, 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 blah. Okay. So essentially, let me actually copy and paste this. Yeah. Sure. I'm putting it into the chat. Last week, I divided you into small groups based off of your content area or kind of an adjacent to that. I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to keep it a little bit more random. That way you can kind of get out of your box a little bit. And I think for this specific question, how assessment bias and fairness relates to different content areas can be pretty enlightening. So I'm going to put you into breakout sessions, but I do want you to answer that question. Yeah. When you go into your breakout rooms, you are not going to see that. It's going to disappear in the chat. So maybe copy and paste that or copy it. And then when you're in the breakout room, someone can paste it. But just to make sure they're all on the same page, does anyone have a good definition or that's going to scare people? Does anyone want to attempt a casual casual definition of assessment bias? With no pressure.
Okay. That could be an assessment, a potential assessment bias could be one that assumes a particular culture.
Mm-hmm.
Like a question could be, I don't know, something about, I don't know, the 4th of July or something about a religious tradition that would not be, be kind of culturally insensitive. It's not something that everybody would be aware of. It's bias based on a presumption of somebody's religion. I'm just throwing something out there.
I'll that's fantastic. I'll even expand on that. So let's say the math question was Johnny lit the menorah and I don't know.
How many times did he have to light it or something?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, where you're not actually testing, I don't know, there was 4 and now plus 1 is 5. Like, you're not testing the math equation, you're testing the knowledge of the menorah, right? And then so that's an assessment bias, because if you're not Jewish, then you're not necessarily going to know how many candles, right? Often often the assessment bias is really obvious to the person who did not write the assessment. So part of the discussion is what happens when you're a teacher and you have some standardized test or thing that you have to give by the district, milestones, or I don't know, EOC, and of course testing. All those words are called different things in different districts. But what happens when you see a question that's like, this is biased? And how does that relate to fairness? So I'm curious on that end. Has anyone had any experience where you felt like an assessment was unfair, or it did have bias? But as a teacher leader, what would you do in that scenario? So that's kind of like a bonus, sprinkle that in there as you answer that question. The importance of relevance of assessment, fairness, and bias. Anybody have questions? Okay. Let me look at these breakout rooms. Let me pause the recording. Resume. Okay, as people start coming in, I'm going to do the whole group thing where people talk about what they talked about. I will say what's been interesting is a lot of y'all have very similar frustrations. So that'll be interesting when I know one person's going to say it and then everyone's like, oh my gosh, yeah, me too. So we're going to do the whole group thing, and honestly, get used to that. I'm all about some whole group conversation for this to feel like a real discussion. Yes, I can lecture on and on and on, but I don't know, like that's just not fruitful. I'd much rather us talk about content, experience, blah blah blah. So I think this kind of feels like everybody. So we'll just go straight to the passions of anyone passionate about something that was addressed that just nerve. Go for it, Christy.
So I met with some of the art teachers. There's 2 art teachers and 1 construction teacher. I myself am a music teacher. I feel like in fine arts, we have to worry about assessment bias more because of holidays and performances. For music, I have to, instead of calling it a Christmas concert, call it a winter concert. I mean, I'm not testing them in their knowledge of religion, but if they're singing songs about religion, then it would come across that way. Anyway, I'd be assessing them on, do they know the melody? Do they know the rhythm and things like that?
Anyone else? Pricked a nerve?
We had a really good conversation in our group about how we have some students who don't speak English as English is not their first language, and how difficult it is for those kids when they're given tests, and that they know the content, but when they have to read it on their own, or they have to read it, they can't do it. And we even got even deeper into it with when we have kids that we think are gifted and they truly just know it, but because English is not their first language, they don't get that. And we kind of talked about how they almost get stuck on a pathway. Noah was bringing up on this pathway, they never quite get where we think they need to be, and it all stems back to they couldn't pass that test. They just couldn't get past that test. So we got pretty talkative about that.
Megan, I saw you nodding a lot. Not to just call you out, but speak your mind.
Okay, so to piggyback off of Sydney, we had a very similar conversation just with EL students that are pretty much forced to take district assessments upon maybe 2 weeks in, 1 week into a new country. And what are they really, and specifically ELA, right? So it's we're assessing, can they comprehend this passage? But if they can't read the passage because it's in English, how are we assessing their comprehension? And it's just something that always just kind of bothers me, because like Sydney said, they end up on this pathway. And these are students that are incredibly gifted. I mean, they are very, very smart. But how do you know that when they can't take a test because they can't read that language?
Yeah. Joe, just because you sort of responded to that when I kind of asked the same question, what were your thoughts?
So we have like 90% Hispanic population with lots of ELL, and a lot of our students, when I write words or directions on the board, I'll have to actually verbalize it because they can't really read or understand what I've already written down. So I don't write a lot of directions on the board because kids will ask me what to do anyway as soon as they look at it. And another thing is, like, I have a lot of kids, ESS kids that don't have fine motor skills. So I have an issue with things that have to be cut. So I have to figure out like how to cut things in advance for them or to help them out. Or drawing. Sometimes I have to do like stencils for the kids, for kids that need a little extra help.
Mm-hmm. So I do, and I know Sarah was in that group, maybe Noah, whoever was in that group. We talked about, okay, does this mean, right? Thinking a little bit more practical, right? Like we can be frustrated all day long about like, assessments and blah, blah, blah. But at some point, like just being frustrated doesn't really do anything other than make you frustrated. So what's the practical outcome to this discussion, right? So Heather, I know I'm coming to you, but so Sarah, in your group, what did y'all talk about of essentially teaching to the test? Where is the line between having meaningful content and having those rich experiences in your classroom and making the curriculum come alive? But then here comes this stupid test at the end of the year that you have to do that shows mastery of whatever, and you might have some vocab words that throw them off. So where's the line between teaching to the test and meaningful curriculum? And not just Sarah, but anyone from that group.
I mean, I feel like we all know, like, teaching to the test is what our administration would probably prefer anyway, because it's our test scores and our CCRPI. Like, those are things that are, because it all comes down to the money. So like we can say all day long that it really is about meaningful content, and even the administrators say it, but at the end of the day, they're going to want to make sure that we perform in a way that doesn't mess up our funding. And I can give a specific example of this. We didn't necessarily teach to the test, but so with the milestone, we're allowed to use the Desmos graphing calculator, and the Desmos graphing calculator does some amazing things. So there were a lot of actual computational skills that we didn't go in depth with. Instead, we taught them how to use Desmos because we knew they were coming in with so many deficits. We actually taught them how to use a tool and allowed them mastery of the tool that would allow them to get to the answers that students in previous years actually had to, they actually had to compute in their head. But once they saw us doing it, the admin was like, "Ooh, are you doing it?" Like, next thing you know, the whole county's like, "How do you do this? Like, we heard you guys were doing X, Y, and Z," and they wanted to adopt that. So throw all of that old school. They need to be able to know how to do the math. That got thrown out of the window in place of, us utilizing a tool that would allow them to they would get to the answers. They don't understand how they got to the answers, but they could find the right answer if they were given, 4 selected, responses. But it worked.
Yeah. Again, I don't remember who was in Sarah's group, but any thoughts on the balance between teaching a test or teaching to the test versus meaningful content?
I have a cop out.
Okay.
My cop out is that they don't care how they do on the art tests. So for me, like if I don't have a lot of kids failing and a lot of parents complaining and everything seems to be going well and they're really learning art and enjoying the class, I get off the hook. If I'm a math teacher, I don't. But for me, I lean into the art making and making sure they really understand the content. And we don't do a lot of prepping and test strategy. When I taught ESOL, it was a different story. But for art, I don't worry so much about the test.
Sure. Okay, then from a core teacher, teaching to the finding the balance. Go for it, Noah.
Say, as the math teacher in that group, they do care a lot about my scores. And kind of the main thing we talk about is like the balance between like you need to know this content, but then if they throw this certain vocabulary word in or certain thing where all of a sudden it goes from do you know this math content or do you know what this word means, and kind of how to balance that. The problem with like the milestones is during the year, my unit test, I can see what's on there. So if I have to, I can expose them to like, hey, you're going to see this word. Like, what does this mean? How would you deal with this? With the milestones, you can't see it. Like, I don't know what's on there. I know like the general, like, I know like what standards and like the breakdown, but I don't know like specific questions, specific wording. So like I do what Heather does. Like I teach them shortcuts with Desmos and I expose them to as much as I can. Like at the end of the day, I'm sure there's some questions where if I was able to explain to them what it wanted them to do, they could all do it, but they probably get it wrong because they don't know what it's like asking them to do. You know, like it's a very wordy test. Like all my kids are like, it was so much work, like so much reading. There's like paragraphs in every question, like, you know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just like a reality where I have to just prepare as much as I can, give them like what I think's appropriate rigor and teach them all the tools that I can give them. But at a certain point, I'm kind of stuck with whatever they give me.
Sure. Okay, so anyone else? Practical advice on addressing assessment fairness, assessment bias, the frustration of meaningful content, but then here comes this thing to throw off the pace, or I don't know. I know that the assessment is going to say this, and that's going to throw them off. Any practical advice on fairness and bias?
I'm like the art teacher. My load is not as heavy as the core teachers. But my issue is that we have like a gap in where we have some programs like some my middle school doesn't have a program. So the last time my children had chorus was in elementary. So 3 years of that and not having anything is crazy when you're coming in, when you're expecting them to sight read on a different level. When you come in and I'm sorry, that's my 1 year old.
You're fine.
And my 3 year old. But once they come in and you're expecting them to read on, just to test their prior knowledge, and they don't have a feeder program, that's the wasted time. And even though we don't have like a standardized test, we do have large group performance that we are expected to, sight read and, you know, pull out all of the stops in the dog and pony show. But the issue is that the funding, because once the funding goes down, then the first thing that's knocked out are the arts. And so when you have a prevalent high school that they have a music program, but you don't have the feeder, then that's I guess would be the bias part, that we don't have that, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. Anyone else? Practical advice on addressing fairness and bias?
I think you
I
just.
just,
Go ahead.
sorry.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
So I just kind of like experienced this right before we got out of school with the inner course test. So I actually administered the U.S. history and I think it was biology. And so I did a small group for my SPED kiddos, and all of them were just like, Miss Lisa, none of this stuff have I ever seen in my life. And they automatically just felt like they bombed the test because they felt like they weren't prepped for it. And we even did like the weekly studying after school with them, and then we did small takeout groups for them to help with some of them with the reading, because that's the major part of it. A lot of them can't read the tested material, so they don't even know what the question is asking. And if it's a paragraph they got to read, they automatically just like, nope, I'm not doing this. And in the small group that I had, I made all of my kiddos wear the headphones. And they were like, we don't want to wear the headphones. And I'm like, I want you to listen to it. And they, after the fact of taking the test, they all thanked me. They was like, we appreciate it because you were right. We needed somebody to read it to us. They did help a little bit. But I just feel like the testing part for them, it just was overbearing for them because, like I said, they can't read the material. And in classroom, they have the gen ed teacher and the co-teacher to kind of help them, with backing up, or even a para in the room to help them read it, to try and break down what the question is actually saying so they get a little bit more of an understanding. But when it comes to the testing part, they don't get all of those accommodations that we give them in the classroom.
Sure.
So I feel like it's just a lot for them to change over from. And
Yeah.
then you expect them to do well, but they're not getting the same setup that we give them in the classroom.
Sure. Brooke, you talked a little bit from when I was in the room. You talked a little bit about the what was it? The reading to learn versus reading for comprehension. How'd you say it?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on what Lisa was saying?
Kindergarten through second grade, they're learning to read. Third through fifth grade, they're reading to learn.
That's what it is. So how does that fit into what Lisa's talking about? Like where, not just with frustration, but any thoughts on reading? And I mean, I even multiple people talked about how like where's the line of assessment fairness when the student doesn't even know how to read? What are your thoughts on that?
Mhm. Well, I know specifically for like my kids, I have the inclusion classroom, so a lot of my kids get accommodations on milestones. And in class, we're reading the things together, we're breaking things apart. Well, in the milestones, I can't help them break the questions up because a lot of them, they're wordy, lengthy questions that it's beating around the bush about what it wants them to answer, and they have no idea. But sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I have really bad pregnancy brain, so you'll just have to ignore me.
That's all right.
But I know a lot of my kids, specifically on assessments, they get read aloud, so it'll read to them, but it only reads the questions to them. To me, how does that make sense? We know they can't read it. That's why they have this accommodation. So why not set them up to be successful by reading the passage to them and also reading the question?
Sure. Okay. Heather, I think you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, in terms of, because I know you were really big, like when you talk about like being frustrated just leads to more frustration, which is true because it's like a snowball thing. And I think the difficulty is, as teachers, I think all of us to a certain extent, we get into this because we want our students to do the best, and it's frustrating when we can literally see all of these barriers. And so maybe kind of the practical thing is you just continue to do what we've been doing. We all are here, we all continue to be teachers, and we know, we're very well aware that the system is flawed, but doing things like you talked about, which was incorporating the prior knowledge into a rubric, or doing things like, when you're teaching something and you realize, oh, okay, we made an assumption of prior knowledge. Sometimes it just means you're going to have to interrupt your instruction to all of a sudden remediate in a way that you didn't think, and you're going to be behind. Like maybe this is just, and then we use platforms like this and we use these degrees to kind of go back into our schools and, kind of be able to make a greater impact, and then become, the teacher leaders, where we're kind of maybe bringing more light to this. I don't know whether it needs to be on a policy level or what have you, but I think we just have to, I don't know, live in the imperfection, which is not a comfortable place to be. But I guess we all just keep doing the best that we can based on the tools that we have.
I mean, even in this class, you've heard me say, I much rather the content be meaningful and this be applied to your specific classroom. What does whatever concept of assessment mean to your classroom specifically? So yeah, I mean, I think at some point, the meaningful curriculum outweighs the assessment performance. What's tricky with that, and I'm curious, does anyone have their TEKS evaluation tied to their assessment scores?
Yeah.
Mine was brought up in my summative conference today.
Yeah, they said we're starting that next year where our milestone scores will be affecting our TEKS.
Anyone else? I think that was 3.
Yeah.
My county, I'm in Forsyth County. We don't do TEKS anymore.
Oh.
We did the piloted Georgia Leads. And I do know it is tied to not mine because I'm an art teacher, but it is tied to that. Their milestone grades are their scores.
Interesting. Anyone else?
Mine will count next year. Starting next year, it'll count.
Oh no, the assessment being tied to TEKS.
Yeah, it hasn't counted for me yet, but school wide, starting next year, it'll start counting towards my TEKS.
Yeah.
Which standard are they going to attach that to?
If you're asking me, I have no idea. To be very honest.
Just in general, I was just curious if I knew if what standard they were going to be attaching that to.
You mean like the TEKS standard, like the domain, or?
Yeah, the TEKS standard, the domain from there. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know. What would it probably be, like assessment strategies, or let's see. Like what could be some? Hold on, let me grab my other folder since we were just going over this. What is that, class 88?
Georgia Leads, if this is coming to everybody since my county was piloting it, your standards that they focus on is based on the number of years you teach. So like I'm at the upper end of the years. So I'm they only assess me on assessment. They don't really look at anything else. They do, but that doesn't count toward my performance grades.
I find that kind of interesting that you said that the assessment scores don't affect you. Like, how can they balance? Like, how would it be fair to not assess you on that, but the core teachers? That's just interesting. I'd be interested to see like what the different platforms look like, or like on each one, because that's interesting that that you won't
Never
be
know
affected
what
by
to
that,
do with
but
me.
that's
They
just
never
so
know what to do with
interesting.
us.
But I mean, that would be more than just you. That would fall on like
It would fall on
PE
SPED
teachers,
too.
music teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
SPED too. I mean, it's
SPED,
not
for
like our
sure.
babies are going to be making, 3s and 4s. Ours are going to be,
Yeah.
1s and 2s. So
Very interesting.
that's
Very
interesting.
So I'm in Tennessee, and ours is tied to the school scores. As an art teacher, I have to take like a percentage of the whole school test scores, and that affects my end of the year scores.
In like in something that's not your content area, or like?
Yeah, I teach art.
And so it's art scores?
I think it's like 15% of my evaluation at the end of the year is achievement measures, which comes from the school-wide scores. So if they do really bad as a school, then my score comes down, even though I don't teach any of that.
That's insane.
I got a question. I wonder also, a big part of the TEKS was, in looking at it also with Georgia Leads, I think that they're looking at student growth, but how are they measuring that growth? Because you have two different set of kids. It's almost like I never really understood that. I teach 5th grade math, and I'm like, how are you measuring growth when I have a whole new set of students? Or is it not the growth of the students you're looking at? You're looking at the growth, I'm supposing, that the teacher made, but once again, you have two different set of students.
What is it? Just like growth of the student over the year?
Yeah, but
Like,
that's
are they
map.
taking a look at multiple years?
I know the map test does that, measures the growth over the year, but the milestones can't do that because you only take it at the end of the year, and you have a new set of students each time. I asked my principal that. I never understood that, and even with the milestones measuring growth, my only problem with the map test and measuring growth is, as a 5th grade teacher, I'm commissioned to teach the 5th grade Georgia standards. The map test tests them on skills from everything. It's an adaptive test. So it goes all the way down to 2nd grade. It's an adaptive test. So it doesn't just focus on the 5th grade standards.
That's how the
How are you even
assessment
measuring? Yeah, how am I
we
being
use
assessed based upon that?
Because I know it was brought up to me that I had several students as a level 3 learner that dropped back down to a level 2, but our test is adaptive. So it started them off really high when they started taking it again, and then it dropped them down as they started getting those really high questions wrong.
I know a lot of my gifted students with MAP, it was hard for them to show growth. It's like the higher the student is with MAP, I always notice it's harder to show growth because even though they were in fifth grade, even the students were talking about it. They started seeing questions on seventh, eighth grade level because it's an adaptive test. So it takes them up, like you said, and then it'll drop them back down. But then at the end, you're telling me that you're measuring my student growth based upon something that I didn't even teach. So I always had questions about that when it came to the MAP test.
I have a question. So, how can, so I like this is all well and good, and it's not. But how can they still ding us when chronic absenteeism,
Listen,
if that's a problem, and it's
That's a
like
big
they're not
problem.
coming to school, and
yeah.
I know in my county there is no attendance policy, so they
Wow.
cannot be dinged if they miss class. So if they're not there at school, like I have one child that has 50 absences in the class, so it's nothing that I can do. If the child takes the test, I mean, what happens? They haven't been there in over half of the days of the semester, but the teachers are still being dean. And then I mean, all the parent has to do is come up there and be belligerent, and then there are appeased. And so, what are we doing?
Sarah, you have your hand raised.
That's the real question. What are we doing? That's the real question.
Tamar, you just had a mic drop moment. I hate to follow that, but yeah, what are we doing applies to a lot of what we're doing.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say, as far as like assessing teachers based on student scores, that's a test validity issue. The test was developed to assess the student's knowledge, not the teacher's practice. That is a misapplication of that particular test, and that's why it doesn't work as the measure for us. Because just like Jermaine was saying, if we're saying like let's say I just got an incredible, that epic group of kids one year, like they're all gifted and my scores are sky high, and then the next year I switch to teaching CP or something like that, and then like all of a sudden I'm a terrible teacher. Or if you're tracking the kids' growth from year to year too, like that's just, there has to be at some point in time, teachers are all in agreement about this, the kid and the family have to have some accountability for their results.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That just made my heart feel so warm. Thank you.
It's because who's to say the kid's not having an off day, and now that score because of their off day because something happened at home now affects us as teachers.
Yeah. So that's the type of, yes, teacher leadership, absolutely. But the critical thinking of assessment. How is this concept of validity, reliability, assessment, and bias, how can we actually apply that locally into a real context, right? It's one thing like, oh, my PLC, blah, 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 blah. But really thinking, okay, as a teacher leader, what can I contribute, even if it's not a policy change? I know Heather's group talked about that at some point. Like, when you're just a teacher, how much policy change can you actually conduct? Okay, sure, fine. But being able to, at the bare minimum, bring up these thoughtful questions like, wait a second, if you're talking about validity and you are assessing me as a teacher, is this not a breach in validity and reliability because you're basing my performance off of another student's performance, right? So for all the students, when you go about your day, and I know that the timing of it is unfortunate because it's the summer, although I love the summer, but like you can't actually apply this immediately, but just kind of keep it in the back of your head. Like when I go back to work, how do I apply these critical perspectives of assessment into my classroom, into my program, into conversations with my administration, into my PLCs, contacting whomever from the board office, district leader, instructional coach, etc. Having these critical conversations is crucial because if we, the people who are in the thick of it, not only as teachers, but as the people who are learning about these concepts, applying them critically into the context, who else is going to do it, right? Like you are the ones who are being the most equipped relevantly to what's going on, uh, educationally, I guess. How are you able to transform practices, policies, culture, perspectives into your local areas? So take that as a challenge, right? It's not just being frustrated about assessment bias and assessment fairness. It's thinking critically about applying these concepts into your practice. And no, that's probably not necessarily, hey, Georgia DOE, you are terrible. You should change the assessment this way. That's probably not going to happen, right? They're just going to delete your email. But go into your instructional coach, go into your department chair, go into whomever about trying to make change, even if it's just a perspective challenge. So those are kind of like your little nuggets. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Well, I just wanted to say one thing. I got some training on evaluation through my county, and a lot of us teachers are very grade conscious of our own grades. But I just wanted to say, I also have a little experience with after your 3 years, you are very hard to get rid of. So no matter what your scores are, and also your school scores, if everyone's sharing your school's poor scores or whatever, that doesn't really reflect on you. But you have to do rather poorly as a teacher over the years in order to really have a job security issue. I think at the end of the day, we have to find an assessment system that's meaningful to us and have an internal compass of what we really feel like we're in that room to do. And whatever trends and fads and whatever evaluators don't understand what you're doing, we can't really waver to that. We have to stay true to that compass because there's a lot of unfairness that comes down the pike, but we know why we're teachers and we know what we think is really important in the classroom, and we can't be distracted by a grade that doesn't mean anything or an evaluator that doesn't understand what we're doing, you know?
Yeah.
Sarah, if I can piggyback off of what you said, that's a very great comment. But I'm also noticing another side of that, though. Whereas you understand that, I definitely understand that. Some teachers, they internalize those scores. I'm seeing right now, we're doing our allotments for next year. And based upon scores, you're having some people who are wonderful teachers, in my opinion. I've observed some of them, wonderful teachers, but because of scores, they don't want to teach in the testing grades. We're having such a hard time, right? Especially fifth grade. We're having such a hard time. Every year it's like a rotating door with fifth grade. They don't want to do it anymore because of testing scores. They don't know how to do what you just said. Take it, don't personalize it. Hey, and just look at it. So in this fourth and fifth at in my county, but definitely at my school right now, we're having such a hard time. No one wants to do it. They'll rather go down to K through second because they internalize those test scores when they come back. And everyone can't do what you well, they're not willing to or haven't learned how to yet. I'll put it that way. Haven't learned how to not internalize that in the way that you just said. So yeah, that's another side of it also.
Yeah. I do think, as I keep saying this, the meaningful curriculum always trumps whatever the thing is. That at some point, that is where you lean on. You lean onto meaningful curriculum and meaningful experiences into your classroom to target the students in your room, right? All the noise that goes on within the building and the state and whatnot will all kind of we'll figure it out. Yes, tie to TEKS, yes, retention, yes, all the things, but at some point, at the bare minimum, focus on the success of your students and meaningful content. So, all that to say, as these, up and coming teacher leaders, think critically about assessment, think critically about the contents of this class, and then apply it to your local area. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of end class here, giving people time either to just, oh, great, I can go have dinner now, or if you have questions, if you have concerns, comments, etc., want to talk in private, I'll stick around. But on a practical sense, you have definitely you've done what is it? Discussion module 2 assessment fairness. I think you only have one discussion this week. So you have done your discussion post for the week. Something that's helpful to me is to, on the discussion post, just saying, hey, I attended class on 5-26. That's helpful just so that I don't know, it's just convenient, but I've written down everyone who's here in case you forget. And if you make the comment saying, yes, I was here, you can still see the post of anyone who wasn't here. So yeah, so that's kind of like your little task, but there's no pressure to that. Again, I have written down who all is here. Any last questions before we kind of scatter around? Okay.
Oh, I do have the group. So somebody said for the group me, if I paste it instead of just trying to open the link, it should work.
So you're saying it worked?
No, I'm just asking because I tried it from my phone and it didn't work. So I was like, maybe I have to try to join this from my laptop instead.
I
was
tried it from
trying it on
my
phone during
phone.
class and it didn't work.
It let me from my phone, but would not let me on my laptop. But I had to have the app. I had to like when I put the link in on my phone, it still came up. It said like 403 forbidden, but then it said open group me at the top, and I hit open the app, and then it let me join it.
Okay.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll figure it out. Okay.
I do think on GroupMe there's a way to add people just by typing in their phone number. Of course, that's not necessarily convenient, but if someone wanted to look at the discussion post of phone numbers and then on GroupMe you just keep adding person at a time. Yeah. All right. So that is our time. I'm going to pause or really stop the recording.